worshipers arise. Let the sons and the daughters sing. I surrender in my all. I surrender to the King. Father, I hear it growing louder, the song of your redeemed, as the saints of every nation are awakening to sing. From our hearts there comes an anthem. Oh, hear the heavens ring. This is our song, a song to our King. Let the worshipers arise. Let the sons and the daughters sing. I surrender in my all. I surrender to the King. Let the worshipers arise. Let the sons and the daughters sing. I surrender in my all. I surrender to the King. I surrender in my all. I surrender to the King.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Go with me, still I will follow. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. I have surrendered my all to Jesus. I have surrendered my all to Jesus. I have surrendered my all to Jesus. No turning back. No turning back.
Morning, everyone. Didn't mean to startle anybody there. Everyone's doing well today. Something I wanted to relate to you starting off today. I was out riding my motorcycle yesterday and stopped to get gas, and there was a lady pulled up next to me. She's probably about 80, and she's right across the I'm on one side of the pump, she's on the other, and I'm sitting there filling up, and I finished filling up, and she asked me, which one of these am I supposed to use? So I walked around, and there were two nozzles and hoses, one on one side, one on the other. One of them was for regular, no ethanol on the left side. The other one was for regular, mid-grade premium with ethanol on the right. She didn't know which one to use. So I said, well, some people will buy the gas without ethanol, but most people would buy the regular with ethanol for your car. She wasn't driving a hot rod or anything. She said, okay. And so I said, well, you'd use this hose here. So she got it and put it in there, and she said, what do I do now? I said, well, you have to push the button to select which one you want. And so I said, do you want me to push the button for you? And she said, yes, please. And so I pushed the button, and she was able to fill up from there. But, we forget, not everybody knows what we know. Even little things that we take for granted, especially when it comes to the Bible. That's what I'm relating it to here. The little things we take for granted that we think everybody would know, they don't. And so when you're talking to people about the Bible, teaching the Bible, realize that they may not even know the simplest things about what you're talking about, and meet them where they are, and start where they are and what they know or don't know, and go from there. But it really, what's that? Anyway, somebody, I just have to remind myself, because even when I think we're all, it's very easy to do that without realizing it. Very, very easy to do that. So again, that's, as I've said before, part of loving your neighbor as yourself is getting to know them and what they know and what they don't know and what their situation in life is. You have to get to know people to meet them where they are. Yes, sir, Ken.
I just think about our running test on these soda machines. You've got 14 different flavors, you know, and the person didn't know really what to do there.
Yeah.
It's complicated and everything.
Yeah. I don't have anybody to run the microphone for me today. I forgot about that. Can I get a volunteer for that? Terry's walking in. He looks like a volunteer. No, Jason just stuck his hand up, so. Haven't got any young, able-bodied guys around here, so we'll get some of us old guys to do it today. I said us. I included myself. There was something else I meant to mention. Oh, yeah. Last time I taught Bible class, you know, we ended the discussion and then everybody wanted to pick it up, and we had talked about a lot of stuff, and Jason Mathis came up to me afterward, and he said, there's Jason. he came up. Have you ever heard Spiro Agnew's? He used to have speechwriters that would come up with these phrases. If you're older, you might remember them. But he had speechwriters come up with these phrases, and you know, the people that didn't like him and disagreed with him, he called them. He got his speechwriters to come up with this phrase called "nattering nabobs of negativism," and Jason kind of felt like he was being a nattering nabob of negativism a little bit. But you know, your question is what started the whole discussion, really. So that's another thing. We need to hear people's questions, different viewpoints, whatever else. One of the worst things, if maybe not the worst thing as far as human interaction goes these days, is this concept of the echo chamber. And I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but it's where you only hang out and interact with people who think and believe the way you do. And so when you're talking, all you hear is an echo back of what you already think and believe. And if you're not willing to talk to people with differing points of view and get to know them and understand why they feel the way they do, you're never going to learn anything, because hearing something echoed back at you, you're never going to hear anything new. You're not going to learn anything. You know, and it's you know, somebody living in a big city and a farmer living in Iowa may have totally different concerns. Doesn't mean either one of their concerns are any less valid. So again, it's getting to know your neighbor, love your neighbors yourself. Yes, sir, Jason.
I don't ever mean to be negative. I don't ever want to come across that way. More so, my questions come from, I know the answer is there somewhere. I'd like to know how to engage a person who might have that question. So, you know, a la the math teacher, the answer's in the back of the book, but show me your work.
Right.
And so show me how you come to, you know, conclusion A from points A, B, and C, because
Right.
Sometimes it's not necessarily clear in my mind. So I love bouncing things off the rest of the congregation, and, you know, and then usually I walk out of here knowing, oh, that's a great answer. I know what to say now. So that's
Yeah.
the only reason
Nah.
I ever question, is to avoid, like you said, that echo chamber, and get
Right.
some answers, because I'm still learning.
Oh, yeah.
Always will be.
Well, I learned a lot that day too. I think everybody else did. But I didn't mean to imply you were a nattering nabob of negativism. You felt like maybe you were being that way a little. I didn't feel that way at all. So, so we had a lot of discussion. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Many, many years ago, when Brian and I met and started, you know, discussing all sorts of silly things, unimportant things and whatnot, it became very obvious that I was at that time, I've changed a lot, but at that time, a spontaneous and positive and, you know, much more outgoing person than he was. And he was a very serious and thoughtful and what I thought to be super negative person. Like I would be like, oh, let's go do this fun thing. And he could tell me 55 reasons why it was a terrible idea and it would never work and it was awful. And so it took us a long time to work through all of that. But all these years later, I realized how God knew exactly why we needed each other. I needed Brian to temper me and to calm me down because I would have been in so much trouble and made so many bad mistakes. And not that being spontaneous and fun and outgoing isn't a good thing, but I just needed somebody to calm that part of me down a little bitty bit, or I would have been in a lot of trouble. And he needed somebody to pull him away from being overthinking everything all the time. So we've kind of balanced each other out through the years, but it never occurred to me to think of what was after step 2 of anything that I would have ever done. So I would have been making constant mistakes, and I would have said any thought that popped into my head without ever thinking of how it might cause a ripple way out to many people beyond. So
Yes.
we need all kinds of people, and you need to seek out somebody who's opposite of you, who's going to
Right.
ask questions. If you're not a question asker, you need to surround yourself with people who are to help you learn that skill.
Yeah. What a terrible world it would be if we were all the same. I mean, we'd probably all really get on each other's nerves, first of all. But, I think you see conflict. If you see conflict between parents and their children, it's typically more often between the same-sex parent and child, the mother, the daughter, the father, the son. And I think, like with my dad, we had a lot of conflict. And I think when that happens, it's because the parent and the child are a lot more like each other than they would ever care to admit. So that's my observation after all these years of that. But along the lines of getting to know people and love your neighbor yourself, I thought of something this weekend I hadn't thought about in a long time. We had, when I grew up, we lived on a farm. We had what would be called a low-income house across the street, across the road from us that my dad owned and we rented out. And the people there I met, I'm glad I got to meet them all because they were some of the finest, nicest people I'd ever want to know. But there was one family that lived there when I was about 12. And again, I was 12, and what I said was without thinking, and I've said some terrible things intentionally, a lot worse than this since then. But again, this is just to give you an idea of thinking about other people and getting to know them and thinking about where they are before you open your mouth, as I did here. But there were 3 sons in this family, and one of them was about 2 years younger than me, about 10. And it was near Christmas one year, and we were outside. I would play with them. They were all good kids. I got to know him pretty well, and I asked him what he was getting for Christmas, and he said nothing. And he walked away real quick, just kind of turned his head and walked away. I was like, what's that? I said, really? You're not getting anything? Why? Again, thoughtless. He turned around and with tears and anger and hurt on his face, he said, because we're poor. And then he walked back into his house. Again, I was 12. I don't know if I would have thought anything more about it if I had known that. Probably I would have if I had thought about his position or the situation he was in. But, did I mean to say what I said that day? Did I mean to cause any hurt? No, I didn't. Has God forgiven me that sin? I hope so. But do you think knowing either one of those things would have made him feel any better? No. So again, it's just something thoughtless we say sometimes can really hurt other people without realizing it. And so, again, to Kim's point, I try to be a little more cautious about opening my mouth and saying something without thinking about it first. Is it a proverb or is it an old saying? I can't remember, but it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Okay, so I've got through next week so we can go through everything we're about to talk about in detail. We went through first 1.5 chapters of 2 Peter last time, but we got involved in this discussion about, sin and the people who die or as a consequence of other people's sins, is God unfair when he does that? So I'm just going to kind of go through a summary of what we talked about in our last class, and then talk a little more about what we talked about, that we got everybody talking the last time. And again, there's a lot to think about here, a lot to talk about, so everybody jump in there at any time. Interrupt me if you need to. So kind of a summary of what we were talking about there. We are all personally accountable to God for our actions. That's Ezekiel 18. God judges every one of us by our own actions, no one else's, not our parents, not our kids. And that whole chapter was prefaced on this saying the Israelites had, where it was basically saying that our parents did all the bad stuff and now we're the ones with a bad taste in our mouth, and God refutes that, says, that's not how it is. If you have a father who does what is right, he will live. If he has a son who does what is evil, he won't. If that guy has a son, the grandson of the first, who does what is right, sees what his father done wrong and doesn't repeat it, then that man will live too. In other words, he's pointing out to him, what you're saying isn't true. I judge you all individually by your actions. So, and again, as some people brought up that night, sometimes people are affected or suffer because of the sins of other people. Example someone brought up was a drunk driver hits another car and kills all the passengers. So the passengers in the other car, they're not accountable to God for the actions of the drunk driver, but they do suffer because of his actions. So sometimes we suffer because of the bad choices we make. Sometimes we suffer because of the bad choices other people make. But sometimes we suffer for no apparent reason because God doesn't play favorites. He makes the sun to shine, the rain to fall on both the righteous and the unrighteous. And that's Matthew chapter 5, verse 45. And I have a lesson. I don't think I've ever shared with you guys my blog. I've got like 38 lessons on there now, a lot of the ones I've done here in the past and other things. But I was going to give you the address of that, so you go to that on the internet if you have a pen and you want to write it down. It's Mark 8520, Mark, M-A-R-K 8520, all one word, .blog, blogspot.com. Mark 8520, .blogspot.com. And it's lesson 36. It's called Why Is There So Much Suffering in the World? Some further thoughts on that. But the question that came up when we were talking about this last time, and again, like I say, I've got next week we can talk about this and also finish up 2 Peter. So we got plenty of time to talk about it. The question then came up, and this was Jason's question basically. Question then came up, if everyone is personally accountable to God for their actions and no one else's, then why does God sometimes punish the innocent along with the guilty? And the example you used was Achan, but the one I thought of that really seems unfair if you think about it, even more so, was all the innocent children that died in the flood. Of course, God didn't assign the children any guilt for the sins of their parents, but they suffered the same earthly consequences. So how do we reconcile that with Ezekiel 18? If everyone is personally accountable to God for their actions, is God being cruel or unfair in a case like the flood where the innocent are swept away with the guilty? And in thinking about that, I've got a lot of points here, but if you think about it, the answer is not simple or easy. Let me stop here if anybody has any questions, comments. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
You can waste a lot of time trying to figure out why God does what he does. But if we could understand God, then we would be God, wouldn't we?
Right.
We just have to come to the place in our life where we say, I don't know, but I trust God who knows.
Right.
Because there are just so many unanswerable questions. People can get so busy concentrating on the things they don't understand, which is just about everything, that they forget that faith is how we go to God. And so I think, trying to understand is kind of a waste of time.
Yeah. Well, in the end, it's kind of and like you say, the answer is somewhat unknowable. But to Jason's point, when someone asks us that question, and we're trying to teach them the Bible, because I've probably learned more. I started with Terry doing the jail ministry in 2015. And I've probably learned more in those years since then when we were doing that than I ever did before, just answering questions, because they asked some questions I would never have thought of, and I'm like, wow, that's a really good question. Let me think about that. Let me get back with you. So I had to study and learn. So but yeah, in the end, there are some things that are unknowable. Your point is well taken. I think the first thing is, from our human perspective, we see the physical death as some kind of punishment. And it may seem unfair, but however unfair physical death may seem from our perspective, death of the soul is infinitely worse. So Ezekiel chapter 18 says, the soul who sins shall die. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him. The wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. And the Hebrew word translated as soul there is nephesh, which is literally the soul, the spirit, not the body. Of course, we're all going to die a physical death, right? That's what he's talking about there. There's no need to talk about physical death. He's talking about death of the soul. That's the important thing. So also look at Luke chapter 20, verses 37 and 38, if you want to turn there. But in the account of the burning bush, calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac,